So we're getting to the part of the evening where we have to ask ourselves, so what now? All right. Am I just a bee supporter, or do I want to be a beekeeper or a bee farmer? I believe, it's my personal opinion, but every single person on this planet should be a bee supporter. And I know not possible. Some people have different belief systems, but I really do believe all NOAA members, at least, should be bee supporters. We should farm in a way, we should garden in a way, we should conduct our business in a way that is friendly towards our pollinators. And how do we do that? Right? We do that by focusing on providing forage. The number one danger and difficulty for bee colonies, never mind beekeepers, is forage. In our country, especially with droughts. So you'll find a lot of bee colonies closer to urban areas because we tend to plant pretty flowers in our gardens that flower at different times of the year. And bees need food all year round, just like we need food all year round. Unfortunately, out there in the wild, in the untouched areas of our country, forage is quite seasonal. And so there are dearth periods. There are periods in our year where there is simply no food for the bees out there. And what we can do as bee supporters is to make sure that we plant as many plants as we can, trees, shrubs, flowers, annuals, perennials, that will provide forage for bees. Whether it's our own or somebody else's, doesn't matter. We have to provide a water source. So this is not difficult. You can just put out a bowl in your garden and fill it with water. Make sure that you put some pebbles or rocks in there so that they stick out above the surface of the water, and that will just prevent the bees from drowning, because once they fall into the water, their wings are wet, they cannot fly, they cannot save themselves. So just make sure that we put some pebbles in water. At home, I've got a chicken water feeder, and I've just put in that ring around the bottom, I've just put some stones in there. I've left that in the felt, and I top it up every now and again to provide fresh water for the bees in the felt. And we have to say no to pesticides and fungicides. We've got to stay away from poison. And I don't have to labor the point. I think I'm preaching to the converted. But just to say, I think sometimes we have to be careful for marketing gimmicks, and also the advice given by salespeople specifically. Don't just assume something is bee friendly, or assume it's bee friendly because the salesperson said it is. Sometimes they'll say what you want to hear. Do your own research before you use a product, and make sure that you are not contributing to the problem. All right, so very basic, but I think it's so easy, so doable. We just maybe need to remind people again that this is what we need to do. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where, do you want to be a beekeeper? So what will that entail? What are you in for? What is the expectancy of a beekeeper? And is this something or a journey that you want to embark on? So let's look at that. So the first thing you've got to do to become a beekeeper is to educate yourself. So AgroProvision has got 2-day courses, and they have a beginner beekeeping course. I did mine through AgroProvision. This is actually one of the recent groups that did their training. It's quite a big group. And you can just see how many people are really interested in beekeeping. Not everybody who does the course is going to go on and be or become beekeepers. I think I'll tell you a little bit about a story in a moment, but just keep that in mind. If you are going to do the course, it's not to say that that makes you a beekeeper. There's still some things that need to happen. I know that Dieter Radek, who's the biggest beekeeper in our country, makes a full-time living out of beekeeping. He also does courses from time to time. And then there's organizations like UBoN, United Beekeepers of Namibia, where you can receive mentorship and guidance and gain practical experience. So that would be another way to become a beekeeper, is to go the street smart way and not go through an official course or training program, but to find someone who is an experienced beekeeper and ask them if they will mentor you and spend a year with them. Every inspection they do, to show up, to help them, and in the process you're learning through practical experience. So that's another way to do that. Here we've got a group of NUST students, which Sharon and I recently took on a beekeeping experience. That's just to give them some exposure. What I like about this is that they got the exposure to beekeeping without having to make the investment in equipment up front. Because if you make the investment in the equipment, the suit, the gloves, all the gear that you need, and you then do the course, which also costs you money, and you then realize, oh dear, this is not for me. I don't want to work with 60,000 defensive bees at a time. Then you've spent all that money and you've gone through all that effort just to get to the end of it and realize this isn't what I want to do. So my suggestion is, if you're still right there at the starting point, you're not sure, should I, shouldn't I, is to contact UBoN and ask if we can take you on a beekeeping experience. You want to see whether this is something that you would actually like to do. And if the penny then drops, then you sign up for the course. All right. So just some perspective on that. Equipment. Let's talk. What do I need? You need a full bee suit. You get half a suit, which is basically just covering your upper body to your wrists. You also just get a veil. Now, if you search beekeeping videos online and you look at the Americans and Europeans, they stand there on a nice hot summer day and they just have a veil on and they're working with these bees and exposed legs and arms, and it seems so wonderful. That is the quickest way to get killed in beekeeping here in Namibia. You simply cannot do that. So please don't look at videos made by the Europeans and Americans, because they're working with a completely different bee. The African honeybee is different and we need to respect it for what it is. And therefore, if you're a beginner beekeeper, you have to wear a full suit. If you become really experienced and you know how to read bee behavior and you want to go there just in half a suit, that's great. But for beginners, there's nothing that ruins the experience as quickly as getting stung. So you don't want to get stung. And the way to do it safely is just to invest in a full suit. So here I have my 6-year-old daughter on the screen, Grace, who's got a little bee suit, and Craig, my husband, next to her kneeling, and both wearing full protective gear. You need gloves, so obviously leather gloves. It's not just any gloves, but they come up quite high on your arm, overlapping the arm of your suit, and that's just to ensure that bees don't crawl between your arm, suit, and the glove, stinging you on your hands. Then we've got the smoker, which we spoke about a bit earlier. So the smoker is basically a tool that we use to mimic a felt fire. So remember, when you're opening the hive of a defensive bee species, they want to attack, they want to protect their food reserves. So in the event of a felt fire, what will happen is that bees will go into the colony, into the hive, and they'll start eating from their own honey, nectar, food reserves to fill their stomachs for energy, because they are preparing for an evacuation plan. All right, it's the evacuation plan is let's eat, let's fill our stomachs so that we have energy to fly away if the flames come close to our home, right? That's a sensible thing to do. So when we come with our smokers, it's a cold smoke, and we use not just any material to create the smoke. So on your course, you will be taught what is safe to use in there, what is not safe to use. But you're creating the smoke which then mimics a felt fire. So the bees think, oh my goodness, fire in the area, let's quickly fill our bellies. And then they are distracted. They're not focused on attacking you. They also have pheromones that are spread throughout a colony in the event of an attack. So if they want to, say, charge ahead, attack this thing coming at us, there's a pheromone that they distribute, and we are trying to mask that scent. So by putting smoke near the hive and at the entrance, they then cannot pick up on that pheromone, and you are then thus diverting or preventing a full-on attack from your colony. Then we need a hive tool. So that's that metal tool you see on the screen that is used just to lift the frames, because bees like to glue everything shut. So they don't want any gaps, and those frames will get quite sticky and glued in there. So you need a little tool to just pry it open and lift the frame. So a hive tool is an essential. And then a bee brush. You can start without a bee brush. I think I went my first year without a bee brush. We just use the bee brush to gently brush bees out of the way if we want to look at a specific frame and the bees were all over it. There are other ways to also get the bees off the frame. But if you're not sure, then I think, it's okay to get a bee brush and gently sweep them out of the way. And then, of course, a hive box, a Langstroth hive box. So it's called Langstroth. It's named after the person who came up with this design. And, in the olden days, when people started beekeeping, they used methods that completely destroyed the hive to harvest the honey, and which meant that the bees have to start over every single time to first build up the wax comb and then store the food and the honey and that sort of thing. So Langstroth came up with a design that allows us to extract the honey, our food, and without destroying the wax comb that the bees have worked so hard to create. Right, so that's a typical Langstroth hive. These hive boxes are available. This particular brand I know is available at Agra La France. But you see the big box at the bottom, that's called your brood box. So that's where the queen will be laying all the eggs in those frames. And then the shallower box at the top is called your super frame or your super. And that is where the honey will be stored by the bees. So in between those two, what you don't see on this picture is what we call a queen excluder. It's just a metal plate with openings, little tiny slits. And those slits are big enough for worker bees to go in and out between the bottom box and the super, but it's not big enough to let the queen go up into this shallow super box at the top. So she stays at the bottom. You're excluding her from going up into that honey layer, that super box at the top. And then you just have the lid. All right, now you can get all the gear. That's great. It's like, let's take the analogy of golf. We can invest in the gear, the look, the clubs, golf clubs, but unless I have the discipline to actually go to the driving range and practice or go to the golf course and play, nothing happens. And it's the same with beekeeping. So you've got to have the discipline to inspect at a minimum once a month during the summertime, although we should be inspecting every second week. I always like to do it every 10 days, but never works out like that. But you've got to do regular inspections. And then, of course, to join a community like UBoN, United Beekeepers of Namibia, where you can receive ongoing mentorship, where you're not just like a solitary bee all by yourself. And this is my story. I did the course at AgroProvision. I was brave enough to go put out the hive box and catch my first swarm, and I had the gear. But even with the practical components of that AgroProvision course, I was still petrified to go and do inspections on my own, because that really is a daunting thing to do if you're a beginner beekeeper and you have to do inspections on your own. There's safety in numbers, and that brings confidence. And it's only once I met Sharon and the United Beekeepers of Namibia community that I really gained the confidence to do inspections. So initially it was through accountability, so someone coming and helping me, assisting me with the actual inspection, so I wasn't by myself, or then going to them and helping them with their inspections. And over time, that gave me the confidence to now today just go and do an inspection on my own. But that's not the best way to start out. There's safety in numbers, and you've got to find a community. Lastly, I want to mention that you've got to have a suitable location. So I'm not sure where you are situated, but if you're in an urban area, I would not advise you, and in fact, there are bylaws and rules and regulations, but to put a hive closer than 100 meters from a dwelling. If you're a beginner beekeeper, you should not try and do that. Doesn't matter if you see other people do it, because an experienced beekeeper might still get away with having hives closer to a dwelling because they know what to look for. They maybe have the discipline to inspect regularly. They know how to read the behavior of the hive. They know what to do in case of an emergency. These are all things, remember, when you're working with a wild insect like this and things go wrong, it goes wrong like that very quickly, and you feel overwhelmed and you don't know what to do. It's a high stress situation when things go wrong, and we don't want things to go wrong. So don't be the cowboy that catches a swarm in your backyard in Windhoek and leaves it there. All right. You've got to find a suitable location. So you've got to look at, if you're not on a farm or a plot, I would suggest you first join the community and find someone who has a location that is suitable to keep bees, that is willing, that will allow you to also maybe put your hive boxes there. So they are, beekeepers, there might be some beekeepers that don't want to mingle, but that's not the UBoN community. All right, we want to help you, we want to encourage you, we want to see you succeed in beekeeping. So I am sure we can find you a suitable location, but it's not your backyard in an urban area. Just keep that in mind. So now you've got to think of, if I have to inspect this hive at least once a month or every 2 weeks, I've got to drive there. And I've got to ask myself, do I have the time to be so disciplined? In my first year, I completely left this colony that I caught. It was a massive swarm, beautiful swarm. I lost that swarm in the end. That swarm absconded because I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't doing my inspections regularly. And part of the self-preservation of our bee species, our colonies here in Namibia, is the fact that they will up and leave if the conditions are not suitable for them. That's why they are able to stay fairly disease-free, because they have this ability to simply move to a more suitable location if they come under attack where they are. So you have to pay attention. There's a time factor associated to this. Then let's count the cost. So what I have here on the screen are just some costs. I've looked at some costs for you. So you're looking at an investment of 2,300 Namibian dollars if you buy the full bee suit. You've got gloves, you've got the smoker, the hive tool, the brush. I put down 2 hive boxes, okay? The last price I checked on a hive box was about 1,700, 1,800. And I bought one when I started, but you really cannot be an effective beekeeper just with one hive box. So I would buy a minimum of 2. If you only have one, you never have something to compare it to, and you don't know if your colony is struggling or not. but if there's at least 2, you can do a comparison. So I budgeted here on the screen for you for buying 2 hive boxes at $2,000 each. And then protective shoes, which maybe if you already have a sturdy shoe that covers your ankles, that comes up a little bit, then you don't need to buy protective shoes specifically. I think that's just the important thing, is that you've got a shoe that covers your ankles. If your shoe is not that high and you feel uncomfortable, like there's something sticking in, we take duct tape and we tape that around our ankles. But yeah, if you want to save the planet and stay away from duct tape, then just get yourself boots that go higher up your legs. The course that you do will not cost you less than 2,000 Namibian dollars. That's the cost of an agro-provision course. And I'm not sure of the pricing on DITA's courses. They might be a little bit more expensive, but you've got to budget at least $2,000 for that. And then something like UBoN membership is less than the price of a pizza these days. So that really is negligible. It's so small. It's such a small cost to pay, in my opinion, for what you're getting out of that membership and being part of this community. I think that really is a steal. But all of that together, you're already at 10,000 Namibian dollars. All right. So I would say between 8.5 to 10,000 Namibian dollars is what you have to budget to start this journey. And I think part of counting the cost now is to say, do I want to spend this money and only inspect once a month? Because remember, if I to put on a suit, it takes time to get all my stuff together, takes a bit of time. So it's not just walking out the house and quickly doing that thing that you want to do. There's some planning involved in it. And if your hives are not close to your house, you've got to drive there or walk long distance to get there in the veld. You've got to budget time-wise that you're going to be busy for a while, and I think it's just what you have to ask yourself is do I want to spend this money? How serious am I about doing this? Again, coming back to playing golf, if you want to spend all this money on getting the clubs and the gear and going for lessons, and you never play golf, that's a shame. So I think this is where we've got to really decide, what is my why? Why am I listening to this talk tonight? And now that I've listened to Leonie speak, what do I think is my next step? Am I just a bee supporter, or am I really a beekeeper? Do I really want to do this and commit to this? Because there is money involved and it does take time. I think a lot of people do the course and then, it's like the suit starts gathering dust. And I don't want any of you listening to this to fall into that trap. So like I said earlier, if you're not sure whether this is for you, before you spend this kind of money, you are more than welcome to contact UBoN and find out if we can organize a beekeeping experience so that you can see for yourself whether you want to make this kind of commitment. UBoN, just briefly, we try to practice conservation through education and removals. So we have a removal group as well. And if you come across a swarm of bees that have to be removed, you can contact the UBoN removal group. And there's some experienced beekeepers on there that can then go and safely remove the bees. We do school and community education, so talks like this with the NOAA community or any other community that would like us to come and chat to them, and schools. We like to link beekeepers with members of the public. Right, we want to see you succeed. We believe in mentorship, and we want to be the voice of beekeepers on a national level in Namibia. So we are also serving and have representation on the Namibia Standards Institute apiculture committee. So apiculture is also just a fancy term for the industry, the beekeeping sector. And we are in the process of assisting with setting of standards for apiculture in Namibia. And then, of course, representing beekeepers on other levels, and other talks on higher government level. All right, contacts. So you might ask, okay, where do I find the equipment? Where do I go for training? Who do I contact? Equipment in Namibia can be found at Agra La Friends. That's the only branch that keeps beekeeping equipment. But if you go to your nearest Agra branch, you can order, and they will then send whatever you've ordered to your local Agra branch. But if you want to go into the shop and see what they have, you have to go to the La Friends branch. J. Gardus Uniwear. UBoN, there, I don't have UBoN's number on the screen, but you can look up J. Gardus Uniwear. Just contact UBoN at J. Gardus Uniwear. They also stock basic beekeeping equipment. And then Easy Beezy probably has the widest range of beekeeping equipment. Birgit there is the contact person, so you can take down her details. And you are welcome to make contact with these people and find out more about their pricing and the basic equipment that we spoke about. But the prices, I think I shared with you tonight. I looked at the Easy Beezy catalog, because what's nice about them is they do have a catalog that shows you all the equipment and the pricing. So that's quite nice. You know, with Agra, you've got to go in or phone. The same with J. Gardus Uniwear. Then there's United Beekeepers of Namibia. I did not chat to my colleague before this meeting to find out if I can put her cell phone up on the screen. But you can email ubonexco@gmail.com if you would like to find out more about UBoN. We have a category for bee supporters. So if you don't want to become a beekeeper, but you just want to be a supporter, we also have a membership category for you. And so make contact with Sharon, ubonexco@gmail.com. Then, of course, Namibia Organic Association. I am assuming all of you are part of Namibia Organic Association, but if you're not, please make contact with them as well. There's so much useful information that they share and the work that they do in our community, in our country. And I think, again, if you look at what it costs to join, it really is such a small price to pay towards conservation in Namibia, in the form of organic farming and gardening. And then, of course, Agro Provision, like I said, Dieter Adek, who does courses, because he's a full-time beekeeper, he's so busy, and he does not always have time throughout the year to do courses. But Agro Provision, that's what they do. Training is their thing. So every term, I think there is at least one beginner beekeeping course. So make contact with Agro Provision. They advertise the courses on their website. And also Facebook. Social media is where they advertise mostly. So have a look there and see. And that is my story.